Hey, everybody. Nathan King here with the Auburn Undercover podcast. Wanted to just remind everybody of our promo we have running right now with our sponsors, Home Field Apparel. You guys can go to homefieldapparel.com and new customers can get 15% off their first purchase with the code Auburn Undercover. That's Auburn Undercover, all one word, all caps. If you guys don't know, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know what Home Field Apparel is, it's a premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis. It's incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs, including a lot of really, really cool Auburn stuff. You guys know better than anybody that Auburn's got some really cool old logos and designs from back in the glory days. And so they've taken advantage of that and gone back, made some really creative sweatshirts and t-shirts and even some joggers. You guys go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. They just launched a new Auburn shirt on October 9th that's honoring Auburn's first national championship season back in 1957. What they did was, and Home Field goes back and they dig through all kinds of old archives in order to find the coolest designs they can get their hands on. They went back and found a postcard that was from that 1957 team that Auburn sent out and has a picture of an old Aubie holding up the Associated Press 1957 National Championship trophy. So if that sounds cool to you, you guys can go to homefieldapparel.com and get that on a t-shirt, and you can get 15% off that purchase if it's your first purchase. Again, the code is Auburn Undercover, all one word. That's Auburn Undercover, all one word, homefieldapparel.com. Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. We have emerged from the bye week, and we are ready for what is probably the most important game to date of the season for Auburn. Right now, a huge division matchup with number 10 Ole Miss coming to town inside Jordan-Hare Stadium at 6 p.m. on Saturday night. We're here with a roundtable edition of the podcast. Got Mark Murphy and Jason Caldwell on, and Jason, you and I talked about it a little bit after the Arkansas game and looked ahead just a bit. That win over Arkansas really was exactly what Auburn needed. You really couldn't have drawn it up much better for them to go into the bye week with that kind of a win where they played, especially in the second half, they played pretty complete in all three phases of the game. But now they have an opportunity to have some momentum against an Ole Miss team that is also riding pretty high and feels really good about itself into what is just a huge, huge division matchup. Not only because, Auburn could kind of give itself some jockeying, like all the teams are doing for that second place spot in the West, but after that, you've got the next one up is Texas A&M, and that's the other team that's also kind of fighting for that position. So just a huge game inside Jordan-Hare Stadium. We'll start with the guy everyone's going to talk about. The best player in this game, probably on either side of the ball, is Matt Corral for Ole Miss. Just what have you seen out of him this season, and what is Auburn going to need to do to slow him down?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the funny thing about Ole Miss is that Matt Corral gets a lot of the attention, and rightfully so. I mean, when you look at him, when you start talking about a guy that completes almost 68% of his passes, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also leads them in rushing attempts, rushing yards, and tied for the team leading touchdowns. So for Auburn, it's he's a different type of guy than KJ Jefferson, but the offenses are kind of similar. I mean, they're from the same bloodlines, if you will. They're from the same Art Briles bloodlines, Kendall Briles and Jeff Levy. And so they're going to do some of those similar things. I think that's really good for Auburn that they just saw Arkansas. But you look at it, for me, Matt Corral gets a lot of the attention. And, Lane Kiffin's, the attention comes from him throwing his clipboard in the stands when they throw a touchdown pass. But you look at this team, and when you just you strip away the fancy stuff, this is a Gus Malzahn rushing game with a more sophisticated passing game. I mean, this team can run the football. They do it with a bunch of different guys, which is a little different than what Gus has done in the past. But when you look at, Snoop Conner, if Snoop Conner was a feature back on most any other team in this league, he's a guy that people are talking about a bunch. He averaged almost 6 yards a carry, has 9 touchdowns. Jared Ely is a home run waiting to happen. has made a bunch of plays. And then Henry Parrish is a guy that catches the ball out of the backfield, does a lot of different things, but Matt Corral makes it all go. Got some injuries on the offensive line, and Mark, something that could be big in this game is that he could have two of his better receivers back that he's missed part of the time with this year, and you start talking about adding more weapons in for Matt Corral and Ole Miss offense, and the challenge only increases for this Auburn defense.
I mean, yeah, Lane Kiffin has a reputation of being a pass-happy type coach, and he certainly is aggressive with the passing game and do a lot of double moves. They do a lot of interesting misdirection type plays and get guys absolutely wide open in the passing game. But, the core of that team, and he'll tell you if you ask him, is their ability to run the football, and that sort of drives the engine. And but they certainly have some good receivers. In preseason, he mentioned he would put his three top receivers up against any three receivers in the country. And it's a possibility they're going to have all those guys for the Auburn game. Dontario Drummond is the only one of the receivers who's played in all the games. And he's a big, good athletic guy. And they just seem to be rolling him out year after year because they lost two really good ones last season, but they're still probably close to the best wide receiver group in the country. So it's going to be an interesting game Saturday night. I think Auburn's going to have to score a lot of points, Nathan, to win this game.
Yeah, and we'll move on to Auburn's offense now. We saw the efficient performance from Bo Nix, but I think a lot of people are kind of looking to this running game. Jason, I'm wondering your thoughts on where Auburn's offense needs to go now, because I was doing radio today and they were talking about establishing the run, and obviously that's something every coach wants to do. But I really think Brian Harsin and Mike Bobo, we've seen so far this season, they've been okay with kind of figuring out what works over the course of the game and then just doing that. I think they like to run the ball. And obviously that's been the identity throughout both of their coaching careers. But again, if we get into a situation where we're seeing Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter can't get huge heads of steam against Ole Miss, like we've seen against other bad run defenses, like Arkansas was supposed to be a pretty bad run defense, and they couldn't do a ton in that game. We might just see them go back to Bo Nix if that's what's working again, because we've seen throughout the season that they're not afraid to do that, even if it means that they kind of not abandon the run game, but much more heavily rely on the pass down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it's dictated by what the defense does on the other side of the ball. We saw Arkansas change up what they were doing basically and say, we're going to try to take away that running game. And Auburn made plays in the passing game. Now we'll see what Ole Miss does, because Ole Miss has essentially been almost the same type of defense. They actually copied Arkansas's defense after what they did last year to Matt Corral. They said, look, that's what we want to do. So they've done that, which has been a little bit more three-man front, playing a little bit softer, trying to keep everything in front of them. If you're Brian Harsin, Mike Bobo, and Auburn gets out there and is able to run the football early, I think they would love nothing better than for Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter to be able to get 45 or 50 carries and grind it out, stay on the field, keep Matt Corral and that Ole Miss offense off the field. My expectations are that Auburn's going to have to throw the ball to set up the run a little bit more. I would expect Ole Miss to go, okay, you showed us that once, do it again. And I think that's what we'll see, from this Ole Miss defense, a really athletic group of linebackers, pass rusher, and Sam Williams from Montgomery that's going to have a little, chip on his shoulder coming into this game. So I think it's an interesting challenge. They've given up a lot of rushing yards. They did to LSU last weekend, but this is an LSU team that if anybody knows what you're going to get from them week to week, then they're full of it, because they ain't no way. We saw LSU last week, the first half of the first quarter, really dominate the football game, miss on a fourth down close, and basically the game was over with after that. I think Auburn has going to be able to run the football against Ole Miss. Can they run it and sustain it and then set up that play action pass? I think that's the key for this offense on Saturday.
Last year, Auburn over in Oxford had 26 first downs. Tank Bigsby had 24 carries, and he was a big reason Auburn kept the Ole Miss offense off the field a lot, and they need to do that again if they can. But what Nathan's talking about is right. Mike Bobo has been willing to change up what he's doing and throw a lot of short passes if that's what was available. And it was really interesting against Arkansas. First quarter, 7 pass completions to 7 different guys. And Jason's right about Arkansas put 4 guys up there on the line of scrimmage. They've just been playing 3 all season. Ole Miss has played with 3 down linemen the whole season and done their best to keep people from getting behind them, throwing the football. And I'm curious to see if Ole Miss is going to change for this game. I doubt they do. I think they saw Arkansas made the change and it didn't really work 2 weeks ago. So I expect Ole Miss to do what they've been doing. And I think one of the big questions in this thing, Nathan, is Ole Miss still a bit of an illusion on defense? The fact that they're doing better statistically, is it based on, circumstances of games and not playing a whole lot of good offensive teams? And I think they're better than they were last year on defense, but I don't think they're absolutely that good. So, if Auburn is anywhere close to playing at its A game offensively, there's a chance to score a lot of points, I think, Saturday night, Nathan.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's exactly where I was going. Jason, I know you did the defense preview this week, and that's been a topic of this game, is that, and because Lane Kiffin's bringing it up a lot, and there is some credit to be given. They win that Tennessee game with a couple big defensive stops, and then they hold LSU's run game in check really well and play good defense down the stretch of that game. He said that game against LSU was probably the best defense he's seen them play since he's been at Ole Miss. But for you, as you looked at the body of work of this defense over the course of the season, how much of that is fool's gold, and then how much of that should Auburn actually be on the lookout for? And what are the things that Ole Miss is doing well as they seem to be improving on defense?
Yeah, I think they're really the only thing that I look at and go, man, that looks much different and much better than in the past is the pressure they're putting on the quarterback. And they're getting after people and rushing the passer. Some of that's been because they've been ahead in some games, and they've been in these shootout type games where people are having to throw the football. So that has contributed to some of those issues. But when you strip it away, you look at Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee. Alabama and Tennessee run for both over 200 yards. Arkansas runs for over 300 yards. That's not a coincidence. I still, when I look at this team, I still see issues along the front line of being able to stop teams running the football. So I think that's where it comes down to for Auburn. I think they're going to have the ability, like I said, to make plays. I think you look at this Ole Miss defense, how much are they willing to take chances? I kind of side with Mark a little bit. I kind of believe that you see them stick to what they're doing. They got one loss right now. It was to Alabama. But when I look at Arkansas, that Ole Miss Arkansas game, and I see 52-51, I see them having to hold off a 2-point conversion at the end. And then, Arkansas moved the football against Auburn, and they did some things. But I look at that game and go, man, Auburn, really had 2 different situations where they controlled that football game against Arkansas on the road in a environment. It wasn't a hostile environment, but it was a good environment. I just think you look at this bye week, if you're Auburn, and you don't come out and just fall flat on your face, and you do what most teams should do off a bye week, which is take a step forward. You do those things, then I think Auburn, I like their chances Saturday night.
SEAL Team has a new home base, exclusively streaming on Paramount+.
Let's hit them hard and fast.
Electrified fences, surveillance cameras. We have to overcome all that without using any of our usual toys.
It's not our gear that makes us the best.
Yeah! Every minute we have boots on the ground is a minute closer to catastrophic conflict.
World's on fire again.
That's our job to put it out. That's what Bravo does. We got this.
SEAL Team. New episodes Sundays, exclusively streaming on Paramount+.
So you've drafted a great fantasy team, but now you need to make the roster moves that will win you your league. We've got you covered on Fantasy Football Today, part of the CBS Sports Podcast Network. with a new episode every single day. We'll tell you who to start, sit, add, drop, keep, trade, and more. For the best advice from award-winning analysts, follow Fantasy Football Today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and wherever else podcasts are found.
Yeah, and one of the big things people have been talking about coming out of the bye week, by the way, Harsin 8-1 in his head coaching career after bye weeks. It's a pretty good clip for him, kind of like that used to be the storyline every year with Gus Malzahn. So Auburn kind of continues that, having a good record. Mark, it was interesting talking today. Really was the first time since Eric Keesaw was hired and he took over for Cornelius Williams that Harsin was really asked to give kind of a progress report on how the receivers are doing. And, he said there was a long way to go, obviously, but at the same time, feels like they've made some strides. Obviously, the game against Arkansas where they only had one drop, pretty much was catching everything Bo Nix was throwing at him. That's really good progress. Seems like, obviously, the protection is one thing, but it seems like against Arkansas, we saw, you were talking about they need to score a lot of points. Seems like against Arkansas, we saw what maybe the potential of this passing game can be when the surrounding pieces around Bo Nix are actually executing at a high level.
Life is a lot easier for an offensive play caller when your receivers actually catch passes that are thrown on target. And I mean, I never got a feeling in that game out at Fayetteville that Auburn was going to lose. Even when Auburn went behind in the third quarter, the way the offense was playing, I just thought it was a matter of time before the defense got itself righted and the offense took control of the game in the fourth quarter. And that's what happened. And I think being able to catch the passes that were wide open was a big part of that. And I kept wondering, when were they going to turn Bo Nix loose running the football? And they saved it till late in that game and worked very well. So, I'm looking forward to seeing, two quarterbacks Saturday night. Both guys can run the football and both very dangerous doing that. Of course, Matt Corral might be running the ball a little too much for his own safety's sake and health, and he's gotten beaten up pretty good the last couple of weeks. But I tell you what you guys were talking about earlier, he's worthy of admiration. That guy is a tough competitor. If I had to pick a best player in the SEC at this point of the season, he'd be number one on my list, and there wouldn't be anybody even close to him right now, because without him, Ole Miss would not be in the SEC West race.
Yeah, that's what Kiffin's been harping on this week. Took a couple different, that's just how Kiffin is, but he took a couple different shots this week already at Bryce Young, talking about the other Heisman contender that gets to just sit back and watch his receivers all come wide open. But he did kind of echo to what you're saying, that offense really wouldn't be where it is without Matt Corral, because they're not like in Alabama. They don't have the kind of 5-star and 4-star pieces all around there. They're obviously recruiting well, but it's not the same talent factory, and you can't just plug in a quarterback in there. The other side of that offensive performance for Auburn that needs to be there is the offensive line. Jason, we saw their best performance this season, again, in another area, in pass protection against Arkansas. And now you wrote about it this week, and now it seems like there might be some real competition there at left tackle because of how well Killian Zaire played, the former JUCO product. He was offensive lineman of the week from the coaching staff. Now Austin Troxell comes back from a minor injury. You had said that, it looked like he had the opportunity to come in an emergency situation. So not a surprise that he's back after the bye week, but seems like there could be a shakeup there in a game where Auburn really needs the offensive line, like you said, to play well against a good Ole Miss pass rush.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked to see Killian Zaire out there. Obviously, when you think about Brian Harsin, so much depends on, has he taken it from, last week all the way through to now, and is he continued to be that guy on and off the field? But when you look at what you're facing, an Ole Miss defense that has those edge rushers, that uses the speed, I wouldn't be shocked. Austin Troxell is a guy that is tough and is gritty, and I know he's earned that respect from his teammates and from his coaches. And so, honestly, I think if Austin's ready to go, then I think for Auburn, you're in a pretty good spot where you're going, hey, we threw the Zaire out there. He showed he was ready for that moment, and now you feel good if you have to go to him. And so I think that's the key. But Troxel has that experience, and he's a guy that's been there and done it. So I think either way, that if they have to go with Zaire, they're fine. If Austin Troxel is ready to roll, then obviously he's a guy that's proven that. So, you're right. Offensive line for this team. Can they go out? And you're right that the kind of that establish it thing is, it's a little overblown sometimes, but I think it's absolutely legit right now for this team. Can they go out and have one of those games? And whether or not it's 175 yards, it doesn't need to be 300, but they need to be able to line up and run the football when they need to run it. And that's been, some of the issues for them, especially in the couple of games they lost.
We're not going to sit here and speculate because we don't know. And Brian Harson's been giving us the same answer about Owen Papo for the last 5 weeks now. But Colby Wooden did seem like he was excited about some players coming back on defense. So maybe that's a possibility. Mark, I guess we've been sitting here and going back and forth on this for weeks with Owen Papo possibly coming back. But what kind of a difference really would that make if Auburn's able to get him back in this game against what Ole Miss likes to do on offense?
Yeah, I was told late last week he would be back for this game unless he retweaked his ankle in practice this week. So I think that's exactly what Colby Wooden was talking about today, getting him back. And, he's a guy who plays well in space. And Ole Miss is the team that tries to get their skill guys one-on-one with linebackers and anybody really in space and try to turn a 5-yard or 10-yard play into a home run type play. And, if Papo's his normal self out there playing, he can be a big factor because he played really well against Ole Miss in the past. And I think he's just perfectly fit for this style of offense as far as one of these linebackers can cover sideline to sideline. And you put him out there with Sakoby McLean, it gives you a lot of athletic ability to try to defend these guys. And, something else to watch too is Auburn's defensive backs have got to be very aware of what's going on because, there's a good possibility even, they got to worry about these guys. The receivers are certainly good, but there's a real possibility that they're going to be 25, 30 yards downfield. And if they don't check back or listen, somebody's going to be chasing a quarterback who's already 15 yards downfield with momentum in that. And that could be a big problem. So that'll be something to watch because over the years, Auburn's defenses have had some problems with quarterbacks who can run the football. And, that's certainly something to watch on Saturday night.
Yeah. And I think if, like you said, if Owen is able to come back for this game, playing well against Ole Miss is certainly something he's done, like you said, against a mobile quarterback. I just have memories in my head of watching Owen Papo over the years, and he's got that ability to cover a lot of ground in open space if a guy takes off and scrambles. So because he's one of the best athletes on the defense. So we'll get into it now, guys. I didn't really prep you beforehand that we were going to actually disclose our picks for the game, but we're going to do that. So Jason, how do you see this one playing out? What are a couple of your biggest keys? And then who wins the game? And what's one player for Auburn that you think has to have a really good game?
Yeah, I picked Auburn 34-31. I think it's going to be a back and forth football game. I think it's going to take in the 30s to win. But I think this is an Ole Miss defense that Auburn can make plays against. I honestly think the Arkansas defense was a little bit better, and Auburn scored 38 on the road against them. I think, it's about making plays. Can you make plays down the field? And so when I look at it, I think it's, offensive line, running game, but one of those wide receivers. Once again, we saw it was a group of those guys against Arkansas, but Javarius Johnson made a big play down the field. And him or, Demetrius Robertson, can they do that again? Can they stretch the field and force, that Ole Miss defense to kind of expand a little bit? To me, that's going to be a key. But I'm going back underneath. I'm going – John Samuel Schenker. I think, again, this is a game, speed, a pretty aggressive defense, those 6, 8, 10, 12-yard passes. I think it's going to be a game where he has 8-9 catches, and is really a vital part of helping to extend drives. So, but yeah, this is, you're right, important game. I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere, but I got Auburn winning in a close one.
Mark, you and Jason have been kicking my butt the past two SEC games, or the past two SEC games Auburn has won. I've been on the opposite end of it. So who's your pick for this one, and who's one player for Auburn that's got to stand out?
We didn't even talk about our picks until after we made them, and we're very scarily similar. I got Auburn winning by 3 points too. I got 38-35, Nathan. And, to me, if they can do it, a real key to making Auburn have success would be either Tank Bigsby or Jarquez Hunter having a really good game, Auburn controlling time of possession, and keep the defense fresh. Auburn's defense doesn't need to be out there 90 plays like it was against Arkansas, and because Ole Miss has got better playmakers than Arkansas did. And if Ole Miss gets 90 plays and Lane Kiffin and Jeff Levy calling plays, it's going to be a big problem. So, but they can't call plays on offense if Auburn's sitting there grinding the ball out for 10, 12, 14 play drives in 5 or 6 minutes, holding the ball. And if they can do that, Auburn's got a great chance of winning, Nathan.
Yeah, I think a couple of weeks ago, I had thought, looking ahead to this game, that Auburn would need to have its best offensive performance of the season to this point in order to win this game. And a few weeks ago, that didn't seem very plausible. And now I think that's probably going to be the case. Again, we talked about it in the open, but just the situation that Auburn has going on, the way that they went into the bye week, and I think Brian Harsin and Mike Bobo are going to have a good plan coming out of the bye week. You're right. It comes down to, they got to get into the high 30s. I've got Auburn winning this one 38-31. Fans the people who know how badly I've picked Auburn this year will probably be mad that I'm actually picking them to win this time. But yeah, I'd say player or players who need to stand out, kind of going along with what you're saying, Mark, is that defensive line. I think somebody along there, we saw against Arkansas what can happen when those guys are making a lot of plays, when they can make a big play. I think that's going to be key. Maybe rattle Matt Corral. Get yourself on the positive end of a big play involving him. He doesn't need to have every single big play on the night. Auburn needs to have some big plays against him. And then I think you've seen a couple games this year where an Auburn defensive lineman has taken over. The pass rush was really good against LSU. I think Ekuliota was probably the best player in that game. He was bringing a lot of consistent pressure. And then Colby Wooden and Derek Hall were, at the end of the Arkansas game, really, really good, getting after it every single play. So if one or two of those guys can turn it on and make life difficult for the Ole Miss offense, I think Auburn's going to be in pretty good shape. So I do think Auburn will have an opportunity to play their best offensive game of the season. I think they will just slightly outscore Ole Miss. So all three of us for Auburn right now. Thursday, we'll have the whole staff picks on the website, the Fearless Forecaster. So you guys can check that out. If you're listening to this on Thursday morning, probably in the afternoon is when it'll be out. So appreciate everybody for listening. That'll do it for us on the roundtable edition of the podcast. Thanks so much to Mark and Jason. Thought that was a fun episode. Appreciate you guys for listening. If you guys did enjoy it, like we did, leave us a 5-star review wherever you guys get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever. The intro and outro bumper music is by Beats by Mordecai. You guys can find him on Twitter, SoundCloud, and Instagram. And until the next episode, me and Jason will recap it after the game on Sunday morning. We will talk to you guys later. Everybody have a great rest of the week.